In 1919, the Boston Red Sox made their biggest mistake. They weren't just selling a player, they were buying an 86-year curse. This deal would become the most expensive agreement in American sports history. Picture this. It's December 1919, just 1 year after the Red Sox won their 5th World Series championship. The team's owner, Frazee, was a Broadway producer who cared more about his theater business than baseball. He had debts to pay and shows to finance. And sitting on his roster was the most valuable asset in all of baseball, a 24-year-old phenomenon named George Herman Ruth. The Bambino, as he was already known, wasn't just a player. He was a force of nature who had revolutionized the game. In 1919, he had hit 29 home runs, more than any entire team except his own had managed. He was drawing crowds wherever he went, filling stadiums that had never seen such excitement. But Harry Frazee saw dollar signs, not championships. What happened next would haunt Boston for nearly a century. On December 26, 1919, the day after Christmas, Frazee made a phone call that would echo through sports history. He called Jacob Ruppert, the owner of the New York Yankees. The Yankees at that time were nothing special. They had never won a championship and were considered second-rate compared to the mighty Red Sox. "Colonel," Frazee said to Ruppert, "I have a proposition for you." The proposition was simple but devastating. Babe Ruth for $100,000 cash plus a $300,000 loan. In today's money, that would be roughly $5 million, a fortune in 1919, but what would prove to be the worst bargain in sports history. Ruppert could hardly believe his luck. The Yankees had been trying to buy star players for years, but no one wanted to sell to them. Now here was Boston, the most successful team in baseball, offering them their greatest star. But there was more to this story than just money, because Babe Ruth himself didn't want to be traded. Ruth had grown up in Baltimore, not far from Boston. He felt at home with the Red Sox. When he heard about the potential trade, he pleaded with Frazee to reconsider. "Mr. Frazee," Ruth said, "I've given this team everything I have. Don't send me away." But Frazee's mind was made up. He had shows to produce, debts to pay, and he believed one player, even Babe Ruth, couldn't make or break a team. He was catastrophically wrong. The contract was signed on January 3, 1920. News of the trade spread like wildfire across America. Boston fans were outraged. Newspapers called it the crime of the century, but the damage was done. Babe Ruth was now a New York Yankee, and that's when the curse truly began to manifest. Ruth's first season in New York was nothing short of magical. He hit 54 home runs, nearly doubling his previous record. The Yankees, who had never finished higher than 4th place, suddenly found themselves in contention. Meanwhile, in Boston, the Red Sox plummeted to 5th place, their worst finish in decades. But it wasn't just about wins and losses. Something deeper was happening. Ruth was transforming baseball itself. His powerful swing and charismatic personality were creating a new kind of fan excitement. Children across America wanted to be Babe Ruth. Adults who had never cared about baseball were buying tickets just to see him hit home runs. And all of this was happening in New York, not Boston. By 1923, the evidence was undeniable. Boston had made a terrible mistake. The Yankees opened their new stadium that year, Yankee Stadium, which newspapers immediately dubbed the house that Ruth built. On opening day, April 18, 1923, Babe Ruth christened his new home with a home run in front of 74,000 screaming fans. The same day, in Boston, the Red Sox played to a half-empty stadium. The Yankees won their first World Series championship that year. Ruth hit 3 home runs in the World Series, leading his team to victory. It was everything Boston fans had dreamed of, except it was happening in the wrong uniform. Meanwhile, the Red Sox were becoming a laughingstock. Good players didn't want to come to Boston. The ones who were there couldn't wait to leave. The team that had once been the pride of New England was now its greatest disappointment. But the curse was just getting started. Throughout the 1920s, Ruth continued to break records. He became the most famous athlete in America, maybe the world. His every at-bat was front-page news. His salary exceeded that of the President of the United States. When someone pointed this out to Ruth, he famously replied, "I had a better year than Hoover." The Yankees built a dynasty around him. They won World Series championships in 1923, 1927, and 1928. The 1927 team, featuring Ruth's record-setting 60 home runs, is still considered by many to be the greatest baseball team ever assembled. And Boston, they finished dead last in their division multiple times. Their best players kept getting traded away for cash. Fans stopped coming to games. The proud franchise that had won 5 of the first 15 World Series was becoming a cautionary tale about what happens when you value short-term money over long-term success. The psychological impact on Boston was devastating. By the 1930s, people were starting to talk about a curse. It seemed like every time the Red Sox got close to success, something would go wrong. Key players would get injured at crucial moments. Routine fly balls would somehow become home runs for opposing teams. Umpires' calls would go against them in big situations. Ruth himself seemed to enjoy rubbing salt in the wound. Every time the Yankees played in Boston, he would hit dramatic home runs. In 1934, playing in his final season, an aging Ruth came to Boston's Braves field and hit 3 home runs in one game, his last hurrah as a major league player. Even after Ruth retired, the curse seemed to continue. The Yankees kept winning championships, 16 more after Ruth left the team. The Red Sox kept finding new ways to break their fans' hearts. The most heartbreaking moment came in 1946. The Red Sox finally made it back to the World Series for the first time since Ruth's departure. They were playing the St. Louis Cardinals, and Game 7 would decide the championship. Boston led 3-2 going into the bottom of the 8th inning. They were 4 outs away from breaking the curse, but in the 8th inning, Cardinals speedster Enos Slaughter scored from first base on what should have been a routine single. The Red Sox center fielder hesitated for just a moment before throwing the ball home, and that hesitation was enough. Slaughter slid into home plate with the winning run. Boston had lost the World Series by 1 run in the final game, in the final inning. Fans who had lived through the Ruth trade were now in their 60s and 70s. They had waited 28 years to see their team in the World Series again, only to watch them lose in the most painful way possible. The 1960s brought new hope, but the curse wasn't finished with Boston yet. The Red Sox built another strong team around young stars like Carl Yastrzemski and Tony Canigliaro. In 1967, they had what fans called their impossible dream season, winning the American League pennant against all odds. Once again, they faced Game 7 of the World Series. Once again, they lost. This time it was to the St. Louis Cardinals, and this time the loss was even more painful. The Red Sox had led the series 3-2, needing just 1 win in the final 2 games to claim their first championship since 1918. They lost both games. Older fans who remembered the Ruth trade began to wonder if they would ever see a championship in their lifetime. The 1970s and 1980s brought the cruelest twists of all. In 1975, the Red Sox played one of the greatest World Series ever against the Cincinnati Reds. Game 6 featured Carlton Fisk's dramatic home run, waving the ball fair as it sailed toward the left field foul pole. It was one of the most iconic moments in baseball history, but they lost Game 7. In 1978, they collapsed spectacularly, blowing a 14-game lead to the Yankees. Yes, the Yankees, as if fate itself was mocking them. The season ended with a 1-game playoff that the Red Sox lost on a home run by Yankees shortstop Bucky Dent, a light-hitting player who somehow managed to clear the high left field wall at Fenway Park. In 1986, they came within 1 strike, literally 1 strike of winning the World Series against the New York Mets. But a routine ground ball rolled through first baseman Bill Buckner's legs, and the game continued. The Red Sox would lose that game and Game 7 2 days later. By now, the curse had its own mythology. Sports writers wrote books about it. Fans performed elaborate rituals to try to break it. Some even made pilgrimages to Babe Ruth's grave to ask for forgiveness. As the new millennium approached, Boston fans began to lose hope. Generations of families had lived and died without seeing a Red Sox championship. Grandfathers who remembered the 1918 passed away, still waiting. Their sons grew old, still waiting. Their grandsons were now middle-aged, still waiting. The Yankees, meanwhile, kept winning. They won championships in 1996, 1998, 1999, and 2000. It seemed like the curse would never end. But then came 2004. The Red Sox built their strongest team in decades around players like Pedro Martinez, Manny Ramirez, and David Ortiz. They made it to the playoffs and faced their ultimate nemesis in the American League Championship Series, the New York Yankees. Down 3-0 in the best-of-7 series, the Red Sox were on the verge of elimination. No team in baseball history had ever come back from a 300 deficit in the playoffs. What happened next was the most dramatic reversal in sports history. Game 4 went into extra innings tied 4-4. In the bottom of the 12th inning, David Ortiz hit a walk-off home run to keep Boston's season alive. Game 5 went 14 innings. Again, David Ortiz delivered the winning hit. Game 6 was back in New York. Curt Schilling, pitching with a bloody sock due to an ankle injury, led the Red Sox to victory. Game 7 was for the American League pennant. The Red Sox won 10-3, completing the greatest comeback in baseball history. But the curse still had one more test, the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals. This time there would be no heartbreak. The Red Sox swept the Cardinals in 4 games, winning their first championship since 1918, exactly 86 years after trading Babe Ruth to the Yankees. Raya la predit to the Carpinse, the Frazee to the beatings of la Bistelish. The Philippine should trading to Bisbal the other Fruiton Shadak, Peter South of mine the folk. Till it's courted the roots up to some to the kitchen cornet was teachers Bandi Jadjadage the Captalon and other paints or fines. That's courted the democrating makeships of the Cardinal in Wisconsin. The pitcher the panta teacher the panda panda to source. The World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals. This time there would be no heartbreak. Till the syllable native son should know what you eat that should our native son. It acted froze to just find you last time we packs up. But perhaps the most poetic moment came during the parade itself. As the team's bus passed through the city, someone held up a sign that read, "Ruth, we forgive you." The Bambino's curse had finally been laid to rest. Looking back, the trade that started it all seems almost unimaginable now. Harry Frazee sold the greatest player in baseball history for what amounted to pocket change compared to Ruth's true value. He turned the most successful franchise in sports into a cautionary tale about short-sighted thinking. The Red Sox would go on to win championships in 2007 and 2013, proving that 2004 wasn't a fluke. The curse was truly broken, but for 86 years Boston paid the price for one man's decision to prioritize money over greatness. The deal that sent Babe Ruth to New York didn't just change two baseball teams, it became American sports' greatest what-if story. And somewhere in baseball heaven, the Bambino is probably smiling, knowing that his legacy outlasted even the curse that bore his name.